welcome. Damn it, Nate. Welcome to Escape. My name is Nick, and I am joined here. I have a full panel today. I'm so excited about this panel today. Nate from Night of the Chihuahuas. Nate, how are you doing?
I am fantastic. Thank you.
Nice, short and sweet. I like it, Nate. And we have two extra special guests that we've never had on the show, and I'm very excited about today. First, we are going to go with Dr. Luis Welter. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this.
And you are a doctor of psychology, a licensed psychologist. Are you currently at Mesa Community College?
Yes, I'm very fortunate to get to teach Introduction to Psychology at Mesa Community College. And then I also have a private practice where I do individual and couples work over a variety of issues that folks might want some help with.
Fantastic. And Mona Morsy, correct? Got that right? So, all right. So they gave me a quick. So Mona is a poet, writer, content creator from the Phoenix area whose work is deeply influenced by her experience as an LGBTQ plus individual and a rich tapestry of her cultural background. And Mona has a Substack, YouTube channel, and Instagram. It's the Lighthouse Monocle.
That's it.
And I see you're not a huge fan of Harry Potter at all.
Yeah, Harry Potter's stupid. I hate it. Forget about it. Send me all your stuff. I'll burn it. I'll burn all your stuff. Just send it to me.
Overrated. Yeah, if you want to get rid of some stuff, just send it to Mona.
Yeah.
You don't want your Harry Potter stuff. So
yeah, I know.
It's like, yeah, I'm not in the Ninja Turtles or comics or anything.
Wait, hold on. I didn't know you have a YouTube channel. What's your YouTube channel about?
Harry Potter.
Yes.
It's about, but it's pre-film Harry Potter. So I love the movies, but it actually focuses on the Harry Potter trading card game and all of like the merch from like the early 2000s, all before the actors' faces were splattered on everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, before Daniel Radcliffe became Harry Potter, you're like,
yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
So I recently kind of got into painting, and my brother, he's my niece, turns out he's like, I got a nerd on my hands. I was like, oh no. So he knew who to call about it. And then so I did a painting of Harry Potter fighting Voldemort, and I wanted not to be just Daniel Radcliffe, right? I was trying to find some reference stuff. I was like, kind of want it to be like, you know, like a little bit different. So it worked out. It was just like, yeah. I was like, can it not be, you know, Daniel Radcliffe? You know, just kind of the nerdy kid who has the scar on his forehead.
So you went with like an Ozzy Osbourne look, right?
Yeah, you know, well, I just kind of went with like generic British kid with the, you know, mop of hair. And
did you Google that?
yes, you'd be surprised how much Googling that took. A lot. All right. So
that's funny.
But so just quick reference for the show. One reason we called the show The Escape is because we feel that escapism is important, and we feel that you know, quick background about myself. When my mom died when I was like 11 years old, and I was a kid, and I was just like, I don't want to be here right now. I got to go somewhere else mentally. And that's where I walked in my first comic book shop, and then I dove into the world of comic books, and it ended up really being a refuge where I could go and weather the storm that was going on in my life. And that's why I think, you know, whether your escape is comic books, movies, Harry Potter, whatever it is, just I think we think escapism is important, and defending escapism is important here. So
being a doctor.
Doctors being okay, you know, it's kind of important, kind of a big deal, you know. So, but unfortunately, one of the reasons that we are focusing on, you know, I don't know what to call it, so I was calling it just mental health in creative spaces because, you know, Nate, you know, is more in the comic book realm. Mona, you know, writing poetry, just. So it wasn't sure what to call it, but there is tragedy in the comic book industry. Ed Piskor ended up taking his own life. He's just over a week ago. And Doctor, I was talking with you earlier where it seemed like the perfect culmination of, events to be like, and just speaking from, I was like, kind of,
You're missing your mic.
oh, sorry. So it was like almost a blueprint of how to destroy, especially a man's character. There were sexual allegations. Those led to.
It's still having trouble.
Okay, I'm talking into it.
All right.
So, there were sexual allegations that led to him losing his YouTube channel with his partner. So his partner split up with him, and then his friends, left him. It's just like, so he took almost every shelter away, and then he puts out a letter a few days later. Next thing you know, that he had taken his life. It was just like such a bam, 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 and it's just like, yeah, that'll do it. It was just such a shame. So that's one of the reasons that, I was talking with Nate, and he's like, well, who should we have on the show? I was like, let's really go into mental health with this one. So,
well, it's such an important topic that thankfully is getting more and more attention, especially since we've all gone through the shared trauma of COVID. And so many people out there are struggling, and they don't really know that. Some folks might not even recognize how much they're struggling. And a lot of folks don't really know what to do when they do recognize that they're struggling. And part of what I'm hopeful for this podcast, and also the panel that we'll be doing at Phoenix Fan Fusion, is to raise awareness about mental health and how important it is. Mental wellness, and I absolutely think that escapism is an important part of mental wellness, and that there are resources out there. There are therapists, there are support groups, there are podcasts, there are self-help groups, there are self-help resources, and just understanding that even when folks feel completely alone, there are people that get it.
I really like that, because sometimes I'll speak for myself. Felt that aloneness. Nobody gets it. And one thing that I'm learning is that it's okay. That it's going to be okay. I should say, maybe it's not okay to feel alone, but it's going to be okay. Maybe you're feeling that in the moment, and try to work through that. But you said you're hopeful, and that's a big thing, I think, is finding resources, communities that give you hope. I'll just talk about me for a minute. Like coming into the comic books community, I started reading comics when I was younger, but in 2011, we started making Night of the Chihuahuas. And we put it down for a few years and then picked it back up in 2021, and kind of like steamrolled into the community. And I think it's both good and bad. But as far as an outlet to meet new people, to have fun, create, it's been fantastic. I got to meet Mona at a kind of a random thing, and we kind of, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like we clicked pretty quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's I might not be the best creator. I've been having a talk with a friend recently about like being good versus great, and I guess I'm gonna try to put in the time and effort to become better, but I'm happy I found something to focus on and like kind of come out of a darker place. And I still have troublesome moments. I do have mental health stuff going on, but it's given me something to focus on. It has given me hope. It would be really cool if we could make a Night of the Chihuahuas movie. I don't know if I should put my hope in that. It would be ridiculous and awesome at the same time.
Can you be an actor in the movie?
Yes, yes.
Chihuahua right here.
Oh my goodness.
Tell me that's not scary. That's a Night of the Chihuahua right there.
I'm pretty sure I saw him on a cover. I'm not gonna lie.
This is
What's his name?
actor.
What's his name?
Her name is Mia, and
Oh,
she's
her. I'm sorry.
that's okay. She's 15, and she's like either whining in the back or not. So I'm sorry in advance if she's like whining, and I gotta pick her up because.
Yep, that's definitely we should get you a sketch cover of Mia.
That would be so cool. I love that.
And just want to throw it out there for Mona as well. She has a story or a book called Love by Lamplight.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. It's poetry, but illustrated, which is similar to a comic book, and different at the same time. Anyways, that's my little two bits, because it's the escapism. I get up every day and jump into what I know of comics, and comics is a spectrum. I don't know if it's a disorder, but there are, your action superhero comics, and then there's your indie, and some of the stuff in indie is fantastic. I'm like becoming more and more involved. Even though we're indie, I'm like learning more about indie. I shouldn't say I'm getting indie, but yeah. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning the book. So it is called Love by Lamplight. Just a bit information about me. The book Love by Lamplight showcases 4 different poems, and I have a collection of poetry that I've been writing since I was like 14 up until yesterday. It's just kind of one of my escapes, if you will, along with all of this stuff here that you see in the background, which is the toys and the action figures and all of this. But a real escape for me has just always been like writing. This like multicultural background that I grew up in was really toxic. My father's from Egypt and he's Muslim, and my mother is from Mexico and she's Christian. And that combination didn't work for them, and it didn't work for me as a lesbian. And so I had to endure church camps and exorcisms and conversion therapy and all of these things that you kind of hear about, that I know doctors cringing at right now, because it's not real. It doesn't work. It's not a thing that
I'm a Christian and I'm cringing at it. So yes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I'm happy to hear that, and because it is something that, everybody's beliefs are different, and everybody deserves to have their beliefs. But once beliefs start to infringe on people's freedom and their life, then we have a problem. And it was definitely that case for me. And so going back to like what Nate mentioned in terms of like being alone and all of this stuff, for the longest time in my life, I felt like I was literally the only person on earth who was like this, who felt this romantic attraction to the same sex. I just didn't know anybody like me, and there were so many people around me that were just denying me of like freedoms and the ability to just feel anything. And so without being able to speak to someone, I really turned to pen and paper, and I just wrote. And a lot of times it was stories, a lot of times it was poetry. And instead of just like printing that the way that we kind of see traditional poetry to be printed, I wanted to combine it with another sort of like escape of mine, which was comic books. So I just combined them, the two of them, and the first issue is Love by Lamplight. And I would say, without it being like superhero stuff, it's pretty much a comic book. You've got panels and images and all this kind of stuff. And but yeah, that's the kind of bit about me, and the little, I guess, the reason behind what it is that I do, and in the hopes that anybody who might be watching this who's like a young person within the LGBTQ plus community, you're definitely not alone. And so, and for me, I know the Lighthouse Monocle Instagram that you mentioned earlier is an open space if anybody wishes to reach out, just to say hi and chat about anything.
Especially Harry Potter.
Especially or they can, I have a Harry Potter Instagram, Harry Potter Morsy. You can go to that one too, and we can chat about Harry Potter.
That's you.
That's it.
You've been harassing me for years.
Yeah.
Hey, do you guys want to talk about your panel real quick?
So our panel will be at Phoenix Fan Fusion on Friday at noon. And the panel is about mental health as a creator. We want to associate or connect. So we're going to talk. There's 5 of us. Dr. Welter is like the big gun, so she can validate, which is the second thing. But we're going to connect and hopefully connect with the audience. Like Mona was saying, she identifies with a group and people can feel safe with her. I'm a disabled vet. I don't know how many disabled vets will be there, but hopefully the idea in forming the panel is that we would represent different walks of life, and that people would feel comfortable hearing from different people in different stages. We all, from what I know, use art as therapy, so kind of creating that space. Then we want to validate and tell people that, like I was saying, it's okay. Whatever you're dealing with, if you're dealing with your sexuality and you feel uncomfortable, it's okay. If you're dealing with alcoholism or addiction, it's okay. For me, just the realization that it's going to be okay was huge. I think I cried for 2 days. It's like, oh, it's going to be okay. Because it hasn't felt okay for years. And I mean, I talked to one of my friends, little side note, and he saw a car accident where a mother and 2 children were killed. And he was a mess. And I just told him it's okay. And he broke down because he didn't feel that he did enough. It's like, what could you do? You were on the side of the road. How could you save somebody in a car from a car wreck? But just to hear that and validate, people in the room. And if we only reach one person, I mean, I would hope we reach a few, but if we reach one person and make a difference for them, the last piece of it is hope. And hope looks different to different people. In 12-step programs, they say, you have to have hope in something. And, if you hope in this glow-in-the-dark Night of the Chihuahuas thing, and this is your hope, but if it works for you, so what? It's what you hope. And there's a quote, I'll just see if I can pull it up really quick. I like this. From Loki, season 2, episode 4. I wrote this down because it was, burning things to the ground is easy. Fixing things is hard. Hope is hard. When I don't know how to form my words right, but sometimes when people are struggling, they can be destructive on themselves, on others, with substances. And it's like burning things to the ground. It's easy. You want to be a wreck and wreck into people, loved ones. I don't mean crash, but, but hope is hard, hoping when you feel that emptiness, that aloneness, whatever, maybe what you felt when your mom passed away, Nick, that it's going to be okay. And a lot of that I understand is processing. We have to process through these emotions that are kind of thrown at us, where we come into the world and we're, sorry if am I rambling? No, if you come into the world, what were you before the world ran you over? And, we have to process that stuff, and it's uncomfortable. But if there is a safe place, we want to give resources to the people that come to the panel. Dr. Welter created an extensive list, and I trimmed it a little bit. And
it needed to be trimmed down for sure. So.
And we also created a QR code so that you could have the extensive list if you want it. But the resources to to be able to reach out, whether you're homeless or you've got substance abuse problems or you're LGBTQ plus now. Sorry, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. There was a couple other categories, or veterans. There's so many resources out there, and finding something, just because it doesn't work the first time, if you're with a counselor or you go to a support group, you might come in and be like, that guy's an asshole, I don't want to be with that guy. Like talking to that counselor or person in a group, like there's other ones. Don't give up, but I think kind of that's it. The escapism of using art is huge. I think a lot of people in the comics community can relate to that, whether it's cosplay, writing, art, and just kind of supporting each other. I haven't heard too much about mental health being talked about in the comics community, and it's not like I'm a pioneer. I thought it would be cool to try to put together a panel, and we're going to see how it goes. I mean, that's all we can do. And if a few people get help, that's amazing. So,
well said, Nate. So, Doctor, I'm going to throw this one, and it's probably the most generic, long-winded answer that you could probably give. But what is it about being creative that helps us mentally so much?
That, I think, is really a great question, actually. We are all ultimately trapped in this skull cap, right? Like, we are all in there actually alone. And it can be really difficult to try and put words to what we're experiencing, to try and describe it in a way that other folks can understand. And I will say that that's, in my opinion, one of the healing components of going to therapy, right? You have a therapist who's trained in helping people to be able to put words to that, to describe their inner experience in a more articulate and compassionate way, hopefully. Art is emotion, right? Art is the expression of those things that we can't quite say out loud properly. We can't figure out how to get other people to really perfectly connect with our experience. And I mean, poetry moves me to tears. Paintings move me to tears. I'm thinking about even in the Marvel movies when, Iron Man had PTSD. That was a real thing, and they did a darn good job of it, of demonstrating, like, what does that look like. And so in those creative spaces, we can express those things and connect with others in ways that sometimes trying to just put words to it is it's not sufficient. Let's put it that way.
And I think, kind of get in there. I think it's just a way to express what's going on in your head. Like you said, you could, because sometimes Nate and I both get tongue tied. We're trying to tell a point, but it's not, like, it makes more sense in your head. And then you start talking and it just kind of unravels and you're like, but if I could just show you what's going on here, and that's why, but you put a brush or a I'll show you exactly what's going on in there, And Mona, I just going over your Instagram before, is like, you really come across, like, if you want to know who Mona is, go check out her Instagram, because she's like, this is my poetry and this is how I feel, and I love that about people. She's like, unapologetically, unabashedly, this is me. Take it or leave it. And I think so many people have a hard time doing that.
Yeah, I think, there was a point in my life where I had a hard time doing that. And I had a hard time doing that because it wasn't welcomed anywhere I looked. You turn in any direction and I was either met with friends who called themselves friends and people who said that they loved me, but they only loved me conditionally. And that's the problem that I found, at least, and I can only speak from my experiences, but conditional love is a very real thing, even from parents who tell you that, I'll love you unconditionally. And that's what all parents say. But then sometimes you're shown something different. I'll love you if you fill in the blank. I'll love you if you look this way, only if you dress this way, only if you love this person, only if you, whatever the case is. And so then you have to sort of say to yourself, well, who's more important, this person who doesn't love me or myself? And I had to choose myself. And so when I decided to choose myself, I left many people in my wake. But it turned out that they weren't benefiting me anyway, whether they were called dad or friend or, whatever the case is. And that's a tough journey to take as a young person. I'm young now, but even then, this whole journey, I was sort of like pushed out of the closet, if you will, when I was 13 and a half, 14. And then everything just kind of went downhill. And even when I was allowed back in the house, which I find myself to be a lucky one, because there's so many statistics of LGBTQ plus people kicked out of their homes and not allowed back in. And so even while all of this tragedy has happened to me, I'm still considered lucky, which is a shame to even say, to realize, And so, there's a point where I had to realize that I have strength in this one person, and that's me. And there was a lot of time where I sort of like spoke to myself out loud. And I know back in the day, they'd say, if you see someone talking to themselves, that means that they're crazy. Well, then I must have been crazy, because I literally had no one to talk to. And so if I was going through a breakup, my first breakup, I went through, on my own. And so what was I supposed to do? And, I toyed with this idea of just like ending it, entirely in my youth many times. And I'm sure a lot of people, I know a lot of us have kind of thought of that. And I had to turn to myself and just say, okay, well, are you going to play around with this, or are you just going to be you? And once I decided to be confident in myself, then I found there were actually more people that accepted me than those that didn't. And, I couldn't be happier.
And that's amazing. Not everybody gets to come to that realization, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I like what you said, though, about people surrounding you. It's one thing that's been really important to me. And there's a few people out there, I think, that are on right now that are friends, and having solid friendships has been a lifesaver. These people, if they're watching, know that I can be crazy, overwhelming, and they still support me. They still love me, for lack of a better word. I feel like that's really important too. It seems like you're saying, kind of, you stand up for yourself a little bit, some of the friendships or relationships will fall away. And it seems like either new ones will develop, or the ones that are solid seem to strengthen, that get fortified. 2 years ago, Nick coming on the Escape podcast, it was our first podcast that we ever did. And now I consider Nick to be a good friend. We've never met in person, but we spend time on the phone laughing and talking about dumb stuff. And if we don't get the words out right, we kind of get each other anyways, so it doesn't really matter. There's a little bit of patience and love in there. But I just want to throw that in there, because I think it's a really big thing to be yourself and have friends and family. But I don't know if I'm saying this right, but just have a group, your group, your clan that accepts you, for all your flaws. And I don't want to say flaws in certain ways, but
yeah, flaws too. That there's going to be imperfections along the way, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting back to Mona, I think we've all had that point in our life where, how true of friends or family do we really have? I remember I was 18 and I pretty much went through a nervous breakdown where, mentally I was basically broken, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I'll go talk to my friends and see if I could, they're my friends, they'll help me. And as it turns out, I had more than one say, I can't go there with you. I don't know what to do. Like you're and it's 18, you're so young, especially mentally, and they just go, I don't know where you're at. I can't even, equate or relate to what you're going through. I can't help you, or worse, I won't go there with you. Sorry.
Yeah.
And Doc, I think part of the thing that for me was when I was younger, I wasn't focusing so much on myself. I was focusing on trying to make sure everybody else around me was taken care of. And maybe you could talk to the importance of, making sure, Mona, making sure you're being good friends to your friends, but making sure you're a good steward of yourself as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, when it comes to our social networks, I think a real important part of keeping that as healthy as possible is accepting people for who they've shown you they are, right? Like everybody gets to be exactly who they are. We're not here to tell anyone how you're supposed to be or anything like that. But it's important to then also observe, like, okay, so how are people? How are they behaving? How are they treating me? How are they treating the server at the restaurant, right? How are they treating their kids, their fur babies, right? Like, and then accepting that that's what they have to offer, and that's okay. It's okay to offer whatever we have to offer. It's okay to say I don't know how to help you, right? Like that. But I'll sit here with you. I'll sit right next to you on this bench, right? And I'll sit here and I don't know what to say. I don't know what the right thing is to do. And I think that might be a point where folks also start to get a little afraid, is that they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. I mean, I can think of a few wrong things to say, like, you're stupid, you kill yourself. Please don't say that. However, for the most part, just being present, making folks understand that there's somebody there that will at least sit with them, even if they don't have any idea what to do. And then recognize and then looking at ourselves and being like, well, am I behaving in the ways that I want to be in terms of being a kind of person that shows up for other people? And a really key component is to make sure, in order to do that, we have to take care of ourselves. That the whole deal when the flight attendant says, put on your mask before, that is a real thing. We have to be focused on taking care of ourselves before we can really be present for others. And part of being well is, for lots of folks, is creative endeavors. It's music, it's art, it's comic books, it's cosplay, creating those costumes. One of my personal favorite parts of Fan Fusion is just seeing all of the just outrageous costumes that people are able to create. And then bonding with others in those creative spaces and finding kinship over whatever kind of issue or identity that folks might be having. So, but that self-care is such a critical component, and recognizing that it's, even though I would say culturally, a lot of times we are told, well, no, you have to take care of everybody else before yourself. And it really is quite the opposite. In order to be the kind of friend, parent, aunt, child, whatever that we want to be, and continue striving to be the best versions of ourselves, focusing on whatever helps to bring us some peace, whether that's going to the gym or drawing or music or therapy or all of the above.
Yeah, and I think that's something I kind of came to the realization. I think selfish, it's a, double-edged sword of a word, where, but at certain points, for a lot of people's own mental well-being, sometimes you have to be a little bit selfish.
And that is one of the things that I talk to folks about a lot, is that it's really okay to be selfish. And there really are two kinds, right? There's the selfish where we're setting proper and healthy boundaries in terms of what we actually have the capacity to be able to do. And then there's the kind of selfish that harms others. And that's hopefully, obviously, not what I'm talking about, right? Like, it's and recognizing too that some days are going to be better than other days, right? Some days we're going to be able to show up and have our full bean count. And then other days we're going to be, kind of crawl under the covers and snuggle with our Chihuahua days.
Yeah, it's. I think I needed one of those days today, but I stuck it out and still went to work. But, yeah, and I think one of the reasons that I really wanted to focus, especially about mental health in creative spaces, I think, and you can correct me if you're wrong. I think especially people in the arts in general tend to be a little more susceptible to not having mental health issues, but things like depression, things like that. It seems to be, and I always joke because I consider myself a creative as well. I always tell people creatives, jokingly, they tend to be a little sensitive, but you know what I'm saying? It's just, it seemed to be, in order to be in that creative realm for me, like I really have to go into the emotions, and that there are certain points where I have to go, I can't go there right now because it's harming, me mentally. I'm only able to wade so far into that pool before I have to go, yep, I need to stop.
Kind of like vulnerability.
Yeah, and maybe it's just me being a guy. I was like, being vulnerable is incredibly difficult for me, and it's just one of those like, yeah, I can only go so far because I know I'm getting, I'm getting, it's too much.
So in those creative spaces, we do tend to find, and I mean, research over, decades now continues to show a correlation. Causation, who knows? But the correlation has certainly been demonstrated repeatedly that highly creative folks tend to be more sensitive to the environment. They tend to experience their emotions in a more sophisticated and complex way, and that I mean, the more sensitive we are, because there's horrible stuff happening every second of every day, right? There's also really wonderful stuff, right? There is balance out there. The thing is that folks who are highly sensitive, right, like the picking up on those energies that are, and seeing the tragedy and everything that happens, and even in our own lives, losing a parent at a young age is one of the worst tragedies that can happen to a person, actually. And I believe that creativity and that sensitivity to emotions and to the energies of others is what creates all this beautiful art. And it strikes me too that a lot of, at least the superhero comics, really are reflecting a lot of the archetypes, as Carl Jung would refer to it, the archetypes of humanity that we look to those comic figures for inspiration, to see superpowers and envision ourselves being able to be the superhero of our own lives. And that, I think, comes from feeling like you're exactly the opposite of the superhero in your own life. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
That's a really good point. And, whenever I look at art, because even, I mean, like you mentioned earlier, whatever it's like poetry or, or like if we look at like Vincent van Gogh, for example, I mean, we know that there was some mental illness in that. And there was, like Rembrandt, the same thing. I mean, even like classical artists, it's like you find these amazing masterpieces when you walk into a museum. And if you look at the history of the artist itself, you'll see that there's some of that. And for me, a lot of the creatives that I know now that I'm an adult and I've kind of created this support system with these friends and everybody, I know that a lot of those creatives, they have the same sort of like historical events that took place as whether kind of like myself or anything else. I mean, we have to put that somewhere or else we'll implode, and then what, you know? And so if there's something that happens to us, I mean, we're emotional beings, whether we keep it inside or not. Sometimes it comes out creatively, and sometimes it comes out in a way that unfortunately can make you a monster, you know? And we see this like hatred in some people, and it's like, hey, maybe if you just put that energy to something creative, you'll be able to see that there's something incredible in you. And so I think it just matters, for me at least, the way that I see it is like, how much investment are you going to put in yourself? Because we all have things that happen to us, and we all have, you know, that. And so for me, being able to say, okay, well, I don't want to just be a victim of this thing that's happened to me. I want to be able to make something of it. And if that something is creative and that something can maybe help somebody else, they hang it on their wall. It's art that they look at, it's books that they read, it's poetry that they read or listen to, it's comic books, you know, whatever. I've found that in my circle of like creative people that we all have a very similar history and an outlet, and that creativity, you know, really helps with that.
And I to like piggyback on that, like if you're watching this and you want to create art, you don't have to be a professional. You don't have to be perfect. It's like the idea of starting, even if you don't finish that work and another idea comes in, like keep creating. An old mentor of mine, very respected artist, works with a lot of artists, says he knows painters that will have, for every 100 canvases that they do, they'll put out one for sale because they don't feel that the other 100 are any good, which may be a judgment on the self, but it's like, just get out there and do it. You know, if you want to write something, you know, there's probably 90 other people who want to write something, but they never actually take the initiative. So like, just to encourage people to start, you know, go to a class, you know, talk to somebody, go to a con, walk up to a table. Hey, Mona, I like your poetry, you know, give me some pointers, you know, or I don't know, something like that.
No, and for me, so during COVID, you know, I work in the medical field. I delivered medical equipment, so there was no lockdowns and staying home for me, and it actually was a lot of work and a lot of long hours. And therapy for me was, I went up to the CVS up the corner and I found the cheapest set of, they weren't even colored pencils, they're like the Crayola twisty things, and that's what I just sat down, and when I had downtime I drew, and it was just such a release. And it was nothing, you know, terribly special, but it was just like, that was so therapeutic for me. And it was just like such a like, like it was just such a, it's undescribable, just that, you know, kind of getting back to like, why is being creative so important? I don't know why it is, but it is important. And it's just like, it's, you know, especially for, you know, for artists, just in general, for writers, you know, painters, whatever, just to get it out. It was just such relief. I just went like, oh, this is exactly what I needed. And it was just such a, you know, it was just mentally, it was just such a like, oh yeah, I miss this so much. And it's a shame that it took something, you know, you get so much pressure of, you know, real life and the world, and it's just like, it's almost, you know, where it takes you away from your creativity sometimes. And it's such a shame, because I think so many people look at, you know, being creative as a gift. If you're, you know, getting back to kind of what Nate's saying, like, even if you're whatever it is, it's not great, but just keep creating, just keep doing it.
And you might get better if you keep going.
Yeah. And so, but one of the things, Doctor, I kind of, and Mona, if you want to kind of comment on this, how do you think the effects of, once again, another big question, the effects of social media have been on just people's, you know, personalities, but also the creative space in general, how that's affected people?
Well, I have to say that one of the wonderful things that has come out of that are things like Mona's Instagram. right? Where there's a space where folks can connect and it's free. I mean, it's a free and open space, not monetarily free.
It is.
Well, that too, I guess, but
Yeah.
hashtag donate. Just kidding. So, and in that sense, it really has transformed our ability to connect to other people that we would never ever have met otherwise. And finding out that, I mean, as you were talking about it, Mona, from finding out that you're not the only person who is attracted to same-sex folks. And I found in particular for the transgender community, social media, the internet, online communities have really saved lives. Really have. Just finding out that you're not the only person who doesn't understand why their body looks the way it does. And so in that sense, having those connections, those creative spaces really has been of benefit for folks. And when we look at the research, it suggests that filters, comparisons, showing only the good parts of our lives, and that has started to really erode mental health. There are a few studies out there that show that folks who are on a social media where they're just scrolling through it and looking at all these perfect people and perfect lives, that they come out of that experience feeling much worse than they did when they started their doom scrolling, I guess we would call it, right? So, and in that sense, it can have a really deleterious effect. So it's something that we need to be mindful of and watch how we're also interfacing it. Like, as you are scrolling through Instagram, for instance, are you feeling worse? Then maybe we should put a pause on that. And also keeping in mind that and this is my opinion, by the way, this is not research that I'm aware of anyway, the algorithms that social media platforms use, they are addictive. They are designed to elicit some of the same kind of lighting up of the reward pathway in the brain that methamphetamine does and that alcohol does. And so that's another thing for us to watch out. And those are some ways that it can be deleterious. So as most things in life, in moderation and intention.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think for me, I've noticed like FOMO was like a really big deal in terms of like social media. So you have this fear of missing out, and so you're looking at other people's life, and then you start, like you said, doctor, like comparing yourself. And so, oh, this person looks to be similar to my age, but look at all the things that they're doing. And then because they've done it, now these influencers are providing like advice that's always unsolicited, because you just you have a camera and you can say whatever it is that you want, and you can post a video, and then people start to take it, and you don't know your audience, you just know who you are. And so the audience can be someone who is easily persuaded, easily manipulated, easily, whatever, and then they go and I think, for me, there's this kind of positive and negative. Although I have a YouTube channel and social media and Instagram and things like this, I try not to be so heavy on it, in terms of like what I post is really just about like, this is what I'm doing in terms of my book, or this is, whatever. My Harry Potter one is just kind of silly. Like I just post Harry Potter stuff, like literally, like it's nothing except for here's a picture of something old school. If you didn't know it existed, it does. And here you go, But, on the positive side, like I've met a lot of like really good friends, like to your point, doctor, like I've met some really good friends, especially over the pandemic, because there was this short period where everybody was like trying to find things to do around their house because they couldn't leave. And so some people found these old Harry Potter cards, and because like I had been collecting them since I was a kid, I had them, but like I was like, okay, no one cares about this, me and maybe like 3 other people. And then the community kind of started to grow, which is really sort of funny because now no one cares anymore. It's just like me and like 3 other people or something. But I say all of that because during this increase in popularity for the game, we had like games we'd be able to do like over webcam, and like I met somebody who is now one of my closest friends, and he lives all the way in Europe, and so that connection could have never been made if it weren't for social media and it weren't for the internet. And so there's pros and cons to everything, and as you say, of course, moderation, but I'm thankful for the ability to kind of like reach other people, because if I just had a comic book without social media, or if I just had, this like card game that I like and want to, like spread the word of it. I mean, it would just be like me and my wife listening to me talk about it over and over and over again. And she'd be like, enough, stop doing what you're doing. Which she still does, but at least I have this space where I can be like, okay, everyone, let's look at something else. So yeah, like that's something that I've noticed though, is definitely like the FOMO is such a huge thing.
Well, and one of the things I'm sure you realize, like, because there's the people who are doing YouTube for a living, and you're like, which that would be nice. And I've talked about this, Nate, before, but in order to do the social media thing in general, like people like, it's a weird thing. Like people think social media, like, I'm like, it is not. Like, you have to play so many games, especially with YouTube. Like you gotta, you can't, your content can't be like this. You have to do the shorts, you have to do the reels, you have to do this, and you have to create stuff. You have to be making 3 to 4 videos a day. And I was going, you know what? I don't have time for that. I just like, I simply don't. And I think so many people who are trapped in that, trying to do the social media game where, like I said, is it the dopamine hits that people are talking about, or like getting all the likes, and then what happens if they're not getting as many likes as their last post? So what did I do wrong? Things like that, and like you said, trying to surf the algorithm, trying to stay in the algorithm, trying to find out what is popular. People are Googling what I should be talking about. It's like, wow. It's such a weird universe that social media and YouTube has created, where I was just like that. And that's kind of the reason I brought up, it just can't be healthy mentally just to try and keep up with all the FOMO, keep up with all the trends and things like that.
And it occurs to me that one of the things that I know that certainly the folks that I talk to report struggling with a lot is post the prime period of COVID, our getting out of the house has not yet returned to the way that it was before COVID. And I think one of the dangers, quite frankly, of social media and having these online connections is that we forget that we should probably leave our house and have real life connections with other folks. And there's been a little bit of research suggesting that some of our social needs are getting met through social media platforms, when in reality when you walk away from those platforms, you actually feel more alone than you did before you engaged with the platform. And so really trying to get folks to get back out into the world, I mean, doing so in whatever manner is safe for them, at the same time that being in the physical presence of other humans and connecting in that way is really important. And trying to get back to where we were before COVID, where we had these, game nights where people would, or thinking about when we were all running around with our phones chasing Pokemons, right? Like, that there were huge groups at Tempe Town Lake, right? Like there was just spontaneously people would show up there. Some fancy monster showed up there, right? So, but remembering that in the end, the most important and coolest social trend is what you're sitting at a coffee shop chatting with your friend about face to face.
So true.
All right, so we are just about at our time limit here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Mona, you can kind of talk about your social media and where people can go buy your poetry, and then we're going to talk about resources, and that's what we'll do to wrap up the show, if that's okay. All right, so where can people go find you and your poetry.
Cool. Well, if you're in the Phoenix area, my book is being sold in a few different comic shops and one coffee shop, which is called Esso on 12th and Highland. Really good coffee shop. If for nothing else, just go get the coffee. It's really good. Greg's Comics, Drawn to Comics. But online, monamorsy.com is my website, and I have links for all the different things that I do. It's just sort of like a fun hub for myself, and I have my Substack on there, also a place for the comic book, and then the next book that comes out at the end of this year will be on there, and then of course my Harry Potter YouTube channel if you're into Harry Potter stuff. It's totally separate, but I just bring it up because we talked about it anyway, and might as well. And then, of course, just reaching out to me on Instagram at the Lighthouse Monocle is the Instagram that I have dedicated to my writing and the poetry. And then the other one at Harry Potter Morsy, I've obviously kept separated because they're two very separate worlds. But yeah, just reaching out to me, and of course, I can just send you a book. My Substack, I will often put like some pages and write a little bit about what the poetry and stuff like that is on the Substack. But yeah, so I would just say the central hub, monamorsy.com, you can find all that information there.
All right, fantastic. And Doctor, where can people go find resources if they need some help?
A recent change, and a very positive change in my opinion, is that in the United States and in Canada, we now have a lifeline at 988. So that's 988. So if someone is experiencing any kind of mental health distress or issues or anything, and even if it's not to that level and you're just looking for resources, 988 you can dial and it will hook you up directly with a trained probably a crisis counselor, but that person can also help to connect you with resources in whatever location that you're in the United States and Canada. They're also, the Trevor Project is a wonderful resource for LGBTQ+. They will talk to anyone though, okay? So, and especially they focus a lot on youth. So they are a wonderful resource. And gosh,
I have the list. I have the list in front of me.
There's so many of them. Thankfully, there are so many of them.
We can, Nick, I can give you this if you want to post it. I mean, there's a lot. So
sure.
I'll just go over the main topics. I don't know how many more minutes we've got. Learn more about mental health. Do I have a mental health condition? Finding mental health services. How to choose a therapist. Substance abuse resources. Unhoused resources. And LGBTQIA plus resources. So we have multiple things under that. We have a QR code that Mona created, and all these links will be under there with a brief description about what each one is. There's probably like 5 links under each one of those subjects. So,
all right, thank you so much for joining us. I think we had a great discussion, and hopefully you guys enjoyed yourself, and hopefully we helped some people out. So what I'll do is I'll kind of let you guys go, and then Nate and I are going to wrap up the show. But I just want to thank you guys so much great information. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. Nate showing off again. So
that is great.
Nate with that tech. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's always great to chat with the both of you too. So thank you.
Thank you. Right,
yes, thank you for inviting me as well. And I'm glad to be able to be a help, a support, and hopefully folks have found some hope in what we've been talking about today.
Absolutely. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right. So, and then there were 2. So Nate, that was great. I'm very happy with how that went. So real quick, when is the panel that you guys are doing coming up?
It is,
where's it going to be?
I believe it's on Friday, May 24th at noon. I don't know what room it'll be in, but it's at Phoenix Fan Fusion at the Phoenix Convention Center. It'll be Mona, myself, Dr. Welter, and then Austin Ackert and Sophia Cox, who I think have both been on your show.
Love those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So we will spend about an hour just talking about kind of what we just talked about. So, and there'll be a cool collectible comic book for the first 50 people.
Hey, hey.
Hey, hey, hey.
So, all right, Nate. Well, I thought that was great. So, I'll wrap it up here. So, if you want to see what we're talking about on the show, typically what we talk about is pop culture stuff, but we thought it was pretty important topic to bring up, especially with everything that's been going on lately. So, but you want to see what we're talking about? Typically, you can check us out on Facebook and Instagram. And if you have not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, that would be great. We're on all the major podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and Google Podcasts. And I still have to update the thing because it's I still have to add X onto here. So, but other than that, thanks so much for watching, guys, and have a good night. Night, America.
Good night.